They called it Ultima Thule, the edge of the known world. A place where maps turned to parchment voids, where the winds screamed louder than the gods, and where Roman steel dulled against shadows. In the winter of 138 AD, a single man stumbled out of the highland mist and collapsed before the gates of Eboracum, modern-day York, his body draped in wolf pelts, his left arm scarred with crude tattoos, and a rusted gladius still strapped to his back. His hair had grown to his shoulders, streaked with white though he was not yet old. And on his arm, faintly visible beneath layers of grime, was the brand of Legio IX Hispana. A brand long thought extinct. The Ninth Legion had marched north 20 years earlier and was never seen again. Rumors swirled in whispers. Some claimed they were slaughtered by the painted tribes of Caledonia. Others said mutiny, that the men turned their swords inward and vanished to escape the yoke of Rome. The official record simply omitted them. But here was one man. He gave no name, only silence. His eyes, hollow and rimmed with cold. It was Tribune Valerius Marius who took custody of the stranger, confining him to a private chamber beneath the fortress while imperial messengers were dispatched to Londinium and beyond. News traveled faster than men, and soon all of Britannia stirred with speculation. The Tribune, pragmatic and weathered, noted one thing above all else. The man bore no signs of recent hardship. His wounds were old, his survival, intentional, which meant this wasn't the story of a lone wanderer, it was a message. The Senate would have buried him. The governor urged silence. But Valerius had a dead brother in the ninth. So he pried. 2 weeks passed before the man finally spoke, his voice a brittle whisper soaked in gravel. "You do not want the truth," he said, "but I will give it to you, because silence is a colder death." His name, he said, was Gaius Tullius Severus. Once an optio, second in command of a century, under the command of Legate Silvanus Falco. A man known for his brilliance and his ambition. Gaius remembered the day they crossed the Antonine frontier. How the grass had turned to frost. How the trees whispered in languages older than men. How the ravens circled not as omens but as witnesses. And how, one by one, scouts disappeared. First, a patrol of 5. Then an entire cohort sent to find them. The land grew thick with fog and screams they could never trace. No enemy revealed itself. No battlefield marked their graves. And then they found the wall. Not Hadrian's wall, not even the Antonine, their own wall. But older, made not of stone but of earth and timber, crowned with strange carvings and bones of beasts unfamiliar. The locals called it Sar Daneth, the Forbidden Line. And beyond it, no man returned. It was Legate Falco who ordered the Ninth to press forward, dismissing the warnings of native guides. He believed in conquest through intimidation. But intimidation meant nothing to what lived beyond Sar Daneth. The earth itself fought us, Gaius whispered. We built fires that would not light. Horses fell lame. And the dreams, he paused, they came every night. Tribune Valerius kept notes. At first, he dismissed it as madness. But then Gaius began naming names. Officers long forgotten. Insignia and sigils of auxiliaries disbanded decades prior. References to tribal kings that no Roman record ever acknowledged. And then, he spoke of the accord. There was no massacre, Gaius said. There was a choice. Falco made it. Some stayed. Some vanished. The Ninth did not die. It divided. The Tribune leaned closer. Why you? Single quote. Gaius didn't answer. Instead, he rolled up his sleeve and revealed a mark. Not a Roman tattoo, but something more primal, etched in black ink. A tree without leaves, its roots coiled like serpents. The symbol of the accord. The Ninth lives, he whispered. But not for Rome. The symbol haunted Tribune Valerius. He had it copied and sent in cipher to Londinium, hoping for insight, but the reply was curt. No such emblem exists in Roman, Celtic, or Germanic records. Maintain silence. Detain the subject. Valerius ignored the last instruction. He moved Gaius to private quarters within his villa, where he kept the man under informal watch and fed him well. The optio seemed to gain strength quickly, too quickly, and though he spoke little, what he shared painted a grim mosaic of the north. There is a kingdom, Gaius said one night, as snow clawed at the shutters. But not one you'd see. Not of stone or senate, but of pact and memory. built not by conquest, but by sacrifice. He spoke of a ravine they'd reached deep in the highland woods, where the Ninth stopped marching and began disappearing. One by one, soldiers deserted. Some walked into the mist and never returned. Others fell to madness, whispering names no one recognized, carving symbols into bark and skin. At first, Falco had them executed. Then, after the third cohort dissolved, he stopped trying. One morning, the legate held a gathering. No scrolls, no messengers, just words. He offered a choice: stay and adapt, or return and perish. Gaius, ever loyal, chose to stay, but not for Falco. He stayed for a woman. Her name was Hera, a Caledonian seer, daughter of one of the vanished chieftains, yet she spoke fluent Latin, knew of Roman gods and emperors long past. She told Gaius that the land kept memories, that Rome's march would not erase them. That there were places in the highlands where time folded inward, and men who walked in would not walk out the same. Valerius listened, skeptical but intrigued. He'd fought Caledonians. There was brutality, but no magic. And yet, Gaius spoke of things unseen but felt: storms that formed over clear skies, animals that bled without wounds, nights when the stars shifted places. Not witchcraft, he insisted. A different kind of law. Not ours. Then came the shock. I wasn't the only one who returned, Gaius said. Another survived, one who didn't stay. He handed Valerius a name: Lucan Marcellus. A centurion, and Valerius remembered it well. Lucan was listed as dead 2 decades ago in the Ninth's last recorded dispatch. But Gaius claimed Lucan escaped the Accord and fled south, reassuming a new identity within Roman ranks. I tracked him, Gaius said. He lives under a new name. In Gaul, but he carries it, the scar, the memory. Valerius was no longer merely a listener, he was implicated. If Lucan lived, and Gaius spoke true, then Rome had buried not a massacre but a schism. A splintering of imperial identity itself. The Ninth hadn't been lost, they had been transformed. Some into shadows of civilization, others into something the empire could not contain. And then came the strangest part. I was sent back, Gaius said. Not to return, to warn. They're coming. Valerius recoiled. The Caledonians? No. The remnant. The ones who never left that forest. The ones who became more than men. It sounded like madness, but Valerius had read the dispatches from Hadrian's Wall. Strange sightings, patrols gone missing, structures found abandoned as if the inhabitants fled in moments. There had been an incident just weeks earlier. A watchtower collapsed, its garrison vanished, with no signs of attack. And always, carved into the beams, the leafless tree. The Accord was not passive. It had plans. Gaius offered one more revelation before silence overtook him. They don't want war. They want remembrance. Rome erased them, but the forest never forgets. Valerius faced a choice. He could report the man, see him tried for desertion, or he could investigate further. Trace Lucan, seek the roots of this hidden kingdom, and learn whether the Ninth Legion truly lived on in exile. He chose the latter. And the moment he did, things began to unravel. That night, Gaius vanished from his guarded room. The door was still locked. The guards had not left their post. But in the center of the room was a single object. A severed branch, carved with the tree of the Accord, and wrapped in a fragment of Roman red. The branch smelled of pine and blood. Valerius stared at it long into the night. The bark had been stripped and carved with eerie precision, runes and glyphs winding toward the leafless tree symbol at its center. The fragment of Roman cloth was unmistakable. Standard issue from the Ninth Legion's centurions, its deep crimson now faded and torn. The implications were dizzying. The guards had seen nothing. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow outside, and Gaius's gladius still hung untouched by the cot. It was as if the man had simply stepped out of existence. Valerius gave no report. Instead, he began assembling a dossier: names, places, dispatches, anything tied to the Ninth. He scoured records in Eboracum's archives and found inconsistencies. Maps of northern Britannia had gaps, as if certain territories had been intentionally left blank. A few older scrolls referenced a cohort that broke protocol and vanished into the Caledonian woods. This was dismissed as desertion, but the dates aligned with Gaius's tale. One reference caught his eye: Sar Daneth, avoid beyond second moon. Reported loss of birdsong, compass deviation, and fevered dreams among scouts. No further expeditions approved. The line had been crossed only once after that, by Legio IX Hispana. Valerius sent word to a contact in Gaul, a merchant scholar who trafficked in forbidden histories and imperial secrets. He asked only one thing: find Lucan Marcellus. Confirm if he lives under another name. The reply took weeks. During that time, strange occurrences began plaguing the fortress. First, a messenger was found muttering incoherently near the stables, clutching a fragment of carved stone marked with the same tree. Then a scout patrol went missing for 3 days. When they returned, they claimed to have wandered the same mile of forest endlessly, as if trapped in a loop. One swore he'd seen a Roman cohort pass through the fog, armor rusted, eyes blank, shields marked with blackened laurels. No insignia, just the tree. By the time the courier from Gaul arrived, the fortress buzzed with quiet fear. The message was short: Lucan Marcellus lives. New name: Marcus Livius. Retired centurion. Lives near Massalia. Confirmed scar. Tree mark on shoulder. Will not speak of Britannia. Valerius made his decision. He would go to Gaul. Leaving Eboracum in the hands of his junior officer, he traveled under a false name, carrying with him the branch, his notes, and a burning need for answers. The journey was uneventful, save for a moment on the crossing when a gull landed on the mast and stared directly at him until the ship docked, its eyes oddly human, unblinking. He found Marcus Livius, Lucan, on the outskirts of Massalia, living in a simple stone cottage surrounded by olive trees and silence. The man was older now, grizzled and wary, but the military bearing remained. When Valerius presented himself, Lucan did not react, until he laid the carved branch on the table. Then, Lucan stood, walked to the doorway, and shut it. "You've brought it with you," he said. "Then they know. They've allowed this." Valerius pressed him. What was the accord? What happened in the forest? Why had Gaius returned, and vanished? Lucan poured 2 cups of wine and said only, "The forest remembers. And sometimes, it lends its memory to men." He spoke at last. Not in the voice of a soldier, but of someone who had seen the curtain of civilization torn open. He confirmed the schism, that Falco had divided the legion. That half chose exile, to learn from the land, to merge with something ancient. The others tried to return, only to find that Rome no longer welcomed them. They were ghosts in armor. Survivors of an event that never officially happened. Lucan said he had spent 20 years waiting to forget. But the forest doesn't forget. And now, it wants Rome to remember. What do they want? Valerius asked. Lucan looked at the tree carved into the branch. Not war, a reckoning, and a witness. Valerius, by seeking truth, had become that witness. And he was not alone. That night, as Valerius left the cottage, he saw 3 figures in the woods. Draped in Roman cloaks, eyes reflecting light like beasts. One carried a standard with no emblem, just the outline of a leafless tree, black against a gray banner. They did not follow. They simply watched. Valerius returned to Britannia changed. The voyage was uneventful, but every gust of wind carried whispers, and every night he dreamed of roots crawling across marble floors, splitting columns, overtaking cities. He brought back no proof, only conviction. The accord was real, the Ninth had become something else, and Rome's silence was not ignorance but denial. But Eboracum had changed too. The fortress no longer felt like stone and order, it felt like a threshold. Soldiers avoided eye contact, there were fewer crows and more ravens. And most notably, the forest had begun to creep closer. Trees once a mile distant now stood at the outer palisades, their bark gnarled, branches twisted in unnatural arcs. Valerius resumed command and sealed away all references to the accord, Gaius, and Lucan. He told no one what he had learned. Until the dreams began. Each night, he saw them, legionaries of the Ninth, standing in ranks within mist-thick woods, their armor mottled with moss, their faces blank. Behind them, Hera, the seer, stood holding a staff crowned by the tree emblem, her eyes glowing faintly blue. She spoke no words, but the message was always the same. Come. One more crossing, you must see what Falco built. The summons was undeniable. Valerius selected a small group of loyal men, 3 scouts, a cartographer, and his most trusted centurion, Publius. He told them only that he was mapping unknown territory. They packed lightly and moved north beyond Hadrian's Wall, beyond the Antonine, into the mist where maps ended. It was on the 4th day that the landscape changed. The light grew dimmer even at noon. Compass needles spun. Birds fell silent. The scouts, hardened by years in Britannia, grew unsettled. The cartographer began sketching the same hill over and over, even though they hadn't seen one in days. Then came the trees. Unlike the oaks and pines of the frontier, these were alien. Bark that shimmered faintly, leaves that turned toward movement. One tree bore armor fragments nailed into its trunk, Roman design, though too rusted to date. Another had bones entangled in its roots. That night, they made camp near a clearing ringed with ancient stones. Valerius did not sleep, none of them did. Around midnight, the fog parted. They saw them. Dozens of figures emerging from the woods, armored yet draped in fur and bark, eyes gleaming. They bore no standards, no voices, just presence. Publius stepped forward, hand on his gladius, but Valerius raised a hand. From between the figures, Hera stepped out. She was unchanged. Not ageless, timeless. The air around her hummed. You returned, she said, not in Latin, not in any known tongue, but Valerius understood her perfectly. I came to see, he replied. She gestured, and the ranks parted. And so Valerius walked. The forest swallowed them, but not with hostility, with purpose. They passed ruins, old Roman camps, shattered idols, stones etched with forgotten gods. They passed a stream that ran uphill, a grove where torches lit themselves. And then they reached Sardaneth. Not a wall anymore, a city. No stone, no roads, built of woven trees, living architecture. Homes with roots, towers that breathed. Roman discipline fused with Caledonian nature. Warriors of the 9th patrolled the perimeter. No longer legionaries, no longer men bound by empire. They were something new. Falco stood at the center. Older, yes, but alive, and regal. He wore a cloak made from both wolf pelt and Roman standard. His face was carved with lines of age and wisdom. And when he saw Valerius, he smiled. Not as a victor, but as a teacher seeing a student arrive. You found us, he said. I had to know, Valerius replied. And now you do, but knowledge is a blade. You must choose where to aim it. Falco explained. The accord was never betrayal, it was adaptation. The empire was dying, too slow to see its own decay. But the forest held something more ancient than Rome, older than any throne. A continuity that did not demand conquest, only remembrance. The 9th had not been lost. It had been planted. Now it grew. And soon, it would bloom. Valerius was offered the same choice the 9th once faced. Return and forget, or stay and become. He asked for a night to decide. Falco agreed. But that night, the forest gave Valerius one more vision, a burning Rome. Not by sword or fire, but by silence. Its people wandering, aimless, as roots broke through cobblestones, claiming the ruins without conflict. Not an invasion. An inheritance. Dawn crept over the city of living wood. Valerius stood at the edge of a platform formed by intertwined branches, gazing over the forest kingdom born of exile. There were children here, some Roman in feature, others unmistakably Highlander, and others who bore both and neither. They trained not in strict formations, but in silence, motion, and instinct. Armor was no longer metal, it was crafted from bark hardened like steel. Spears bore runes that flickered when held. Even the wind seemed to obey a rhythm. Falco joined him, his steps light for a man of his age. This place, Valerius began, is not for Rome to understand, Falco finished. Why me? Because you chose not to obey. Like the 9th, and because the forest accepts witnesses before it accepts heirs. Valerius turned to face him. Is that what this is? Succession? Falco looked toward the horizon. Rome was not the first empire to fall, nor will it be the last. But few leave behind seeds. That day, they led him deeper, beyond the city, to a grove of standing stones blackened by time. At the center, a single tree, immense and ancient, leafless even in summer. Its bark bore carvings in both Latin and an unknown script. The ground beneath it was soft, pulsing faintly. Era waited there. She held a dagger. Not to threaten, but to offer. Every legionary who joined the accord marked themselves in blood, Falco said. Not as oath, as memory. The land remembers through us. Through sacrifice. You must choose what to leave behind. Valerius took the blade. He cut a line along his left palm and pressed it to the tree. The roots responded. A light flared, not bright, but ancient, deep and crimson. For a moment, he heard the voices of the ninth, chants of the march, the cries of battle, the silence of abandonment. And then, a warmth. Not welcome, but recognition. You are remembered, Era said. That night, Valerius remained in the city. But he could not sleep. Visions came. Of ravens circling Rome's forum, of maps that bled ink when drawn too far north, of emperors staring into mirrors and seeing trees instead of crowns. The accord was not content with its hidden kingdom. It wanted return. Not through war, but through replacement. When Valerius awoke, Falco was gone. Era told him, he has returned to the roots. He was given a final choice: stay and become part of the accord forever, or return south as its voice. He chose the second. They marked him with the tree, not cut, not burned, but woven into his skin. And when he returned to Roman territory, no one recognized him. His eyes had changed. His voice carried weight beyond rank. The governor refused to meet with him. He was summoned to Londinium, then across the channel to Lugdunum, where senators studied him like a relic. But he spoke plainly. The ninth was not lost. It evolved. The land you called savage was never yours. It accepted us because we listened. They dismissed him as touched by northern madness. But they remembered the tree. And soon, signs of it appeared across the empire. Small, at first, a carving on a barracks wall. A forgotten standard unearthed from the soil, bearing no legion number. Soldiers claimed to dream of forests where time didn't move. Merchants spoke of voices whispering in unknown tongues just outside the cities. And Valerius, now a ghost of the empire, traveled southward. To Carthage. To Alexandria. To Athens. He left no letters, only branches. Always carved with the tree. Always planted in silence. The empire watched, uneasy. It had buried many threats, rebellions, conspiracies, cults. But never roots. The ninth had not returned to conquer. It had returned to wait. And beneath every stone road, behind every marble arch, in the cracks of statues and the lines of forgotten prayers, the accord grew. Patient. Unseen. Unstoppable. By 150 AD, whispers of the Arbor Silentium, the Tree of Silence, began to spread beyond rumor. Governors across distant provinces reported strange symbols etched into milestones, temple doors, and even military banners. Always the same. The leafless tree, roots coiled in quiet threat. Rome had enemies, dozens of them, but none that planted signs rather than raised arms. The Senate debated its meaning behind closed doors. Superstition, said some. A barbarian cult, said others. But a few remembered. Legio IX Hispana. Still officially recorded as lost to enemy action, but too many details refused to die. A handful of senators had sons in the legions. They knew the ninth hadn't been defeated, they had vanished. Valerius became a myth in his own time. Never staying long in any city, always walking alone, he carried no coin, no standard, only a cloak of dark green and the carved branch slung across his back like a sword. He never entered temples, he slept in groves, and wherever he went, strange things followed. Wells that refused to dry, animals gathering in unnatural silence, plants blooming out of season. And people remembered him. Because he never spoke of Rome, only of what comes after. One day, he arrived in Rome itself. No heralds, no ceremony. He simply walked into the forum, barefoot, and stood before the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. A crowd gathered, and he said only one thing. Stone forgets. Roots remember. He turned and left. Within days, the statue cracked at the base, cleanly, with no clear cause. The next morning, every laurel in the Palatine Hill Gardens had shed its leaves. Panic began to spread. But the Accord did not act. It watched. Valerius knew his time was short. The blood he'd given to the tree pulsed through him still, but the visions came harder now. Sometimes he saw the past, marching alongside Falco into the mist. Sometimes he saw futures that bent in on themselves. Cities swallowed by vines, statues crumbling as forests rose in their place. He returned once more to Britannia. The grove was larger now. Saardaneth no longer a city of wood but of memory. It did not grow in space, it grew in mind. The Accord had become more than a place. It was a pattern, a rhythm, a breath that passed from dream to dream. Era greeted him with no words. She knew. Falco's place was his now. He stood beneath the tree again, his palm pressed to its bark, and this time it opened. Not in bark or sound, but in time. He saw them, every legionary who had chosen the Accord. Some were dust, some were trees, some were simply names in the wind. But all were still present. They had become the land, its stewards, its secret. Valerius did not die. He returned. His body, perhaps, fell one day beside the tree. But his memory walked elsewhere. In the dreams of centuries. In the rustle of leaves beyond the wall. In the quiet moment before thunder, when every soldier holds his breath. Rome would fall, but not by blade. It would fall because it had forgotten. And the Accord remembered everything. 2 centuries later, a monk in Iona translated a scroll found buried beneath a monastery wall. It spoke of a legion that vanished into the woods, of a tree that drank memory, and of a man named Valerius who bore both the mark of Rome and the voice of the forest. He showed it to no one. But that night, a branch was left on his windowsill. No wind had passed. No footstep had sounded. Only the rustle of a leafless tree, growing still.